time to disrupt the status quo and to give you permission to see more possibility than maybe you stand at right now at an intersection point. This is the time of year we're filled with commencement speeches, graduations, and big shifts as we shift into daylight. And I find it fascinating our perception of what is safe, what is stable, and some kind of expectation of luxury. Because when I grew up, like many in my generation, we were told finish school, go on to university, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder, and that's your guarantee of safety. It's also your guarantee of financial stability. And I find it fascinating because in my dad's generation, that was true. My dad spent almost his entire career with one company. He was mentored, supported. He was made mistakes and forgiven for them. And it seems like this really cute period of time that I have no personal connection to at all. Because in my own career, it's not been that storyline. I remember being 25 and phoning my dad to say I have been invited to be a director of a company I was running their sales org at that time at a really young age. And he said, wow, Christine, you've changed more companies than I had in my entire career and you're not yet 25. And I said, Dad, that stability doesn't exist. And that's been my story. When I first left university, I moved to the big city. I was excited. I was hired as a marketing manager for a tech startup. And it was a very rude awakening to an adult life in the big city. I was hired and I was the only woman on staff except for the secretary. And I said to my boss pretty early on, it's weird that there are no women beyond me. And as a young person without, big social network in a new city, I said, it'd be nice to have lunch with another woman. He did, in fact, choose to offer the next role to a woman. She was a couple years older than I, and she was hired as a technical writer. But 3 or 4 months into that new person in the team, I found myself cast astray because my married boss started to have an affair with a young woman he'd hired. And my job was the perfect cover story because my job as the marketing manager involved travel, trade shows, and events, and they could continue this affair without his wife being aware. And at the time, I was given what seemed to be a decent check and shush money. I did go to the company, HR, the parent company, and I was told, he is the company, take your check and disappear. You will have a great career ahead of you, and we'll give you a very strong reference. And I was thinking, wow, like what's happening here? And I was devastated, as you can imagine, and no one in university or in the traditional school system had prepared me that that's what life could be like in the world of corporate or in any place, truthfully. I now know that, but at the time I didn't. And I remember going home in tears and my dad saying to me, I'd never imagined that my daughter would experience the byproduct of the casting couch. That's what he had called it. Very, very much Mad Men terminology. But he's like, I knew it existed. I just never imagined it would exist today in your life. And Christine, all you get to choose at this time is one, not to judge her and her choices. You do not walk in her shoes. You do not understand the choices she made. You don't get to judge her. That's not your role. But you do get to decide what kind of woman you will be in the world of business and as an individual, because the only thing you are responsible for is your own choices. So who do you want to be? Because what's happened before, you cannot change. You can only go forward from this pivot point. And I went back to the big city, rebooted my career, and set off in a new direction. And that's not the only time I've had to do that. The most recent really big pivot point that I can recall happened many years ago. Not quite a decade, but certainly within the last 10. And I had a sailing career, was in high gear, and I also hit a massive pivot point. I was top performer. I had big visions. I loved my job. I worked way more than the 40 hours were required, a typical 60-hour work week, because I cared about the people I was serving, from my big team that was halfway across the country and to all the people that they supported under them. And yet I thought great performance would mean security, and it did not, any more than it did in the early days of my career. I was 1,400 kilometers away from home. I envisioned at the end of a day of travel that I would be in the hotel lobby having a glass of wine, listening to the piano bar. Except for when I walked into that hotel at the end of the workday, HR and my boss were in the lobby, in that piano bar. And I thought, this is only going to end one way, because I have been on both sides of that equation, and you knew it was coming. I walked into that discussion. 20 minutes later, my life was changed dramatically. They flew home, and I did not have the same luxury, which is a kick in the teeth, truthfully. I had to spend the next 17 hours in that hotel. I had to make the phone call. I had to spend the night alone in the dark, crying. It was a hot mess. But it didn't change the facts that that was my reality. And I thought, what a poor leader that I didn't know it was coming, and what a poor leader for not managing the expectations if there were troubles in the water. Fast forward several months, it was quite a dark period, and I had another pivot point. Someone who was a direct report to me in that role that I was seen as no longer a cultural fit for came to me and said, "Your role has just been posted. They'd never filled it. I'd like your help getting the job. Would you help me prep an application and interview to land the job you vacated?" You can probably imagine the jaw hitting the floor when I had that phone call. I thought, God almighty, the audacity. While I was still hardly breathing on the floor, she saw an opportunity and she was taking it. And I thought to my dad at that time, and that first moment of another woman taking an opportunity and going after it, and I thought, I respect your tenacity. And in that moment, I get to decide what kind of leader I am. And I did help her. She got the job. She held it for many years. And it was a moment where I could hear that through line in my life where my dad said, "Christine, there are 3 types of leaders. You will always get to choose what kind of leader you are through your actions, not just your talk." The first kind of leader gathers facts. That's the kind of leadership we see a lot around right now. People love the data. Everybody's making decisions around data. Data sets are flawed and can be completely manipulated, but everybody loves the data. I can tell you what the data shows. That's the first level of leadership, but it's not where it stops. The second level of leadership says, I will interpret the data and have an opinion around it. I think of it always like the so what factor. Tell me of the data, but more important, interpret it for me. That means you're learning to critically think. You're learning to create patterns. You're learning to say it means this. And at that level of leadership, it thins out. A lot of people say, I'm just going to collect the data. I don't want to really put my head above the sand because I might get it chopped off. But there are a few that will wade into, I will be depended on to have an opinion and help define the decisions that are available because I can interpret the data set. The third type of leadership is rare, and I am on a mission to create more of them. The third type of leader is the person who will interpret the facts, gather the facts, and take a decision, fully recognizing that leadership is not a popularity contest. You don't make decisions because it's going to be popular. You're going to make it because it is survival. It is an integrity. It holds the values, and you're willing to be judged, and often harshly. And in today's world, publicly. But that kind of leadership is what is needed now more than ever. And that's where the 1% hang out. I think it's shocking that the school system doesn't help people critically think and become exceptional leaders. Those are always seen as elective courses and not a heartbeat. And yet, in the old school where my dad was raised, that was what your career was meant to be about. Supported in an organization, learned from data analyst to interpreting to management who made the tough calls. And yet that's gone MIA. I mean, I can look at any industry, and I support clients all over the world in many industries, and I see leadership crises. We don't want to have difficult conversations. We don't want to have an opinion. Any opinion you do have could be career limiting. And every single one of us has gone through the cycle where we've been gifted a package, shush money, or sent out the door without a thank you very much and a little explanation. That's why where I stand today in the world, the lens I see it is, it's my responsibility to, one, first off, be the kind of leader I want to be. And my job as a business mentor is to help other leaders, business owners, create more leaders, because they're not learning it from the school system, and middle managers are hardly breathing, and young people are saying, I don't even want to be in the world of management. And senior leaders, this is the number 2 things I hear them say: I don't have time for that, and I don't have bandwidth. I'm thinking, what? Seriously, what? When I was in my career, somewhere in the middle years, my adolescence, I worked for an incredible organization that was 100% promote from within, and they're the 5th largest company on the planet at the time. I don't know what they're at number now, but they'd be still up there. They're a very big, very big, very big player. And when I was brought into that organization, I went into it because I came from startup. And they said, you might die here. I said, yep, I might. They're like, it's going to take 18 people to decide what sticker people walk on the floor, and then another 20 people decide what shade of purple it is. That's how we do business. I think you might die here. I said, yeah, I might. But I want to be around people who will help me be a better leader. Because when you're in an org that promotes from within, the expectation is, yes, the business metrics are there, but more importantly, the people metrics shifted the weight of whether you were performing. And they gave me a chance. And I did struggle. I struggled in the bureaucracy. I struggled in the decision-making, but they did teach me to be a much better leader of people. A person who did not jam on my staff, a person who stood in integrity, a person who stood at that 3rd level of leadership. And they said, if you are not with us 3 years into your hire date, we had a hiring mistake, because we are looking for our next leaders. And this is what I do now. I take some of those best concepts. I take that first storyline. I take the moment and the pivot points and say, what kind of leader do I want to be? Well, I want to be the kind of leader who helps create other leaders. Because business ownership in a very simple business 101 capacity is a leadership choice. It's self-leadership every day. What will you do and not do? It is leadership of your clients to ensure they get the results. And if you're serving more than one client, hello, you should be, then you need to have the skills of mix of different leadership styles and leadership flexing that says I can help all of them get the results by supporting them differently, by living in that 3rd level of leadership. And it is about managing and leading your vendor base to ensure the wheels of commerce keep moving, results keep moving, the engine keeps firing. And the amazing thing about that, when I look at who I serve now as a business mentor and strategic advisor, I am getting out of bed every day like oxygen to build a future leader. I have people that ask me, who should I hire? How should I manage this person? Because they come to me with 2 things that they're crystal clear on. Number 1, I will have the difficult conversation. I will coach, mentor, and lead you through it because I want you to be a better leader. Number 2, I will always tell the truth, because my number 1 responsibility is to advocate for your best interest, which sometimes means I call you on your BS. Sometimes it means I hold your vision for you when you're wobbling. And sometimes I remind you how incredibly awesome you are, because you're a work in progress, but you're choosing to be at the elite leadership level. And I think when I look at the world of business, whether it's corporate or whether it's entrepreneurship, I am constantly aware that leadership is MIA. And so I have a responsibility, and I'm making that choice to be building the next set of leaders as I continue to be a better leader. I'm a work in progress, just like you. But I will tell you, there's been so many moments that when the pivot point happened, I knew I couldn't change the inputs. I was 100% responsible for the outputs. So if you are listening to this, we're day 9 of our challenge. I want to call within you the leadership, the choices you're making. And if you're not getting support, you're not being guided, you don't have a business confidant who has your number 1 best interest at heart, who will help you build the leadership skills, who will help you build leaders within your organization, we should have a conversation. This is how we be the change we want to see in the world. Because truthfully, the traditional mechanics are just churning low-level leaders. I can gather the data. And my friends, if you're in the gathering data set, you're going to be out of a job because AI can do it faster for you. It is also starting to have some ability to say, so what? And to give you predictable patterns and to run the pattern analysis. But what it will never be able to do is give the context of the decision-making, the consequence, and the holding the line of the vision. That is that elite level of leadership. My friends, that's where we need to be shooting for. We're capable of it. And it takes brave few who say, I'm ready for that. I hope you're one of them. And I believe you are because you're in my network. So I want to see you, my friend, back here for day 10 because this is our time. This has been a 10-day challenge. I knew these moments when they happened to me, it would change my life. I love the direction I chose because I focused on who do I want to be as a leader? Who do you want to be as a leader? Comment below. Come have a coffee with me. I'd love to know because we got to turn the lights on and help build the next set of leaders. I'll see you tomorrow for day